The champagne glass slipped from my hand, shattering against the marble floor of the Riverside Country Club. Around me, 200 guests gasped as the golden liquid spread across my designer shoes. But I wasn't looking at the mess. I was staring at my fiancé Ryan, who was sprinting toward the exit with his phone pressed to his ear, completely abandoning our engagement party. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus needs me, he had whispered to me moments before, his face pale as death. It's an emergency. He's having a breakdown. Marcus, his ex-boyfriend from college, the one Ryan claimed meant nothing to him anymore. Everyone was staring at me now, waiting for my reaction. Ryan's mother, Linda, rushed over, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Jake, honey, I'm so sorry." You know how Ryan gets when someone needs help. But I knew something everyone else didn't. 3 hours before our engagement party, I had seen Ryan's phone light up with a text from Marcus that read, "I can't watch you marry him. Please come find me tonight. I'll be at our old place." It's the same Marcus who Ryan had been secretly meeting for coffee every Tuesday for the past 6 months. The same Marcus whose therapy bills Ryan had been paying with money from our joint savings account. The same Marcus who had sent Ryan a dozen roses last Valentine's Day while I was working late to afford the engagement ring, currently sitting untouched on the gift table. So when Ryan's father, David, approached me, his face stern with disapproval, asking why I wasn't chasing after my own fiancés to help during a crisis, I simply smiled. Because, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, a man who runs to his ex-boyfriend during our engagement party has already made his choice. And I've made mine. Ryan and I met at a tech conference in Seattle 3 years ago. I was presenting my startup's new app, and he was there representing his marketing firm. After my presentation, he approached me at the coffee station, his smile warm and genuine. "That was brilliant," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Ryan. I think you just revolutionized how I think about user experience." Ryan was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He was charming, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in building a life together. He had this way of making everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person there. His laugh was infectious, and he remembered details about people that made them feel special. We started dating officially after that conference. Ryan would drive up from Portland to Seattle every weekend, or I'd take the train down to see him. Those early days felt magical. We'd explore Portland's food scene, hike in the Columbia River Gorge, and spend lazy Sunday mornings reading in bed at his apartment. 6 months into our relationship, Ryan told me about Marcus. They had dated during their senior year at Oregon State, Ryan explained, but it ended amicably when Marcus moved to San Francisco for graduate school. "We're still friends," Ryan said casually one evening as we walked through Pioneer Square. "He's back in town now, working as a therapist. Great guy. You'd like him." I appreciated Ryan's honesty. In my previous relationships, ex-partners were always sources of drama or secrecy. Ryan's mature approach to maintaining friendships with former partners actually impressed me. It seemed healthy, evolved. The first time I met Marcus was at Ryan's birthday dinner 8 months into our relationship. Marcus was exactly what I expected, artistic, with an easy smile and intelligent eyes. He worked as a trauma therapist at a local clinic and spoke passionately about his work helping veterans. Throughout dinner, he was polite, asked thoughtful questions about my business, and even complimented the watch I was wearing. "Ryan's told me so much about your app," Marcus said over dessert. "It sounds like you're really changing how people interact with technology." There was nothing suspicious about their interaction that night. They hugged goodbye like old friends, and Marcus even thanked me for including him in the celebration. If anything, I felt relieved that Ryan's ex was someone I could respect. Over the next year and a half, Marcus would occasionally appear at group gatherings. A mutual friend's housewarming party here, a birthday celebration there. He was always friendly but never overstepped boundaries. Ryan never seemed particularly excited to see him or disappointed when he couldn't make events. Their friendship appeared exactly as Ryan had described, it comfortable but not intense. When Ryan and I decided to move in together last spring, I suggested we find a place that was convenient for both our jobs. Ryan worked downtown, and my startup had an office in the Pearl District. We found a beautiful loft with exposed brick walls and huge windows overlooking the Willamette River. Moving in together felt like the natural next step in building our future. Ryan was an ideal roommate and partner. He cooked elaborate dinners. On weekends, kept our shared spaces clean, and never hogged the bathroom. We fell into comfortable routines, morning coffee together before work, evening walks along the waterfront, weekend trips to the coast or mountains. Our friends constantly commented on how well-suited we seemed, how natural our relationship appeared. Proposal happened 6 months ago during a weekend trip to Cannon Beach. Ryan had planned everything perfectly, a sunset walk along the shore, the ring hidden in his jacket pocket, even a photographer secretly capturing the moment from a distance. When he got down on one knee in the sand with haystack rock silhouetted against the orange sky, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Planning our engagement party consumed the next several months. Ryan insisted on handling most of the details himself, which I appreciated since my startup was going through a crucial funding round. He booked the Riverside Country Club, arranged the catering, and even designed the invitations. His attention to detail was impressive. He remembered my preference for white roses over red, made sure the menu included options for our vegetarian friends, and even arranged for a jazz quartet because he knew I loved live music. The guest list included 200 people, our families, college friends, colleagues, and the community of people we'd built together in Portland. Ryan's parents flew in from Sacramento, and my father drove up from San Francisco. Everything seemed perfect. Perfection, I learned, can be a carefully constructed illusion. The first crack in that illusion appeared 3 weeks before our engagement party. I was using Ryan's laptop to order a surprise gift for him when I noticed his messaging app was open. I wasn't intentionally snooping, but Marcus's name at the top of the recent conversations caught my eye. The messages were innocuous enough at first glance, discussions about Marcus's work stress, Ryan offering support and encouragement, but something about the frequency bothered me. They were messaging every day, sometimes multiple times per day. The conversations had an intimacy that seemed to go beyond casual friendship. One message from Marcus stood out. "I don't know how I'd get through these tough cases without you to talk to. You understand me in ways nobody else does." Ryan's response, "You know I'm always here for you, whatever you need." I closed the laptop quickly, feeling guilty for reading their private conversation. But the unease lingered. That evening, I casually asked Ryan how Marcus was doing. "Oh, you know Marcus," Ryan said, not looking up from his phone. "Okay. Always dealing with heavy stuff at work. Trauma therapy takes a toll. I try to check in on him when I can." It was a reasonable explanation, but something in Ryan's tone felt rehearsed. The second crack appeared 2 weeks later when I discovered Ryan had been leaving work early on. Tuesdays, I only found out because his colleague mentioned it during a happy hour we all attended together. "Ryan's so dedicated to his volunteer work," she said. "Every Tuesday like clockwork. It's inspiring how he makes time to give back, even with everything going on at the office." Volunteer work? Ryan had never mentioned any volunteer work to me. When I asked him about it later, he seemed momentarily flustered before explaining that he had been helping Marcus with some pro bono therapy sessions for veterans who couldn't afford treatment. "It's not really volunteer work," Ryan said. "More like assisting Marcus with his caseload. Didn't mention it because it's pretty informal, and I know you've been stressed with the funding round." Again, it was plausible. Ryan had studied psychology in college before switching to marketing, and his desire to help others was one of the qualities I loved about him. But the final crack that shattered my trust happened just 3 days before our engagement party. I had surprised Ryan by coming home early from a client meeting, planning to cook dinner together. Instead, I found him on our balcony, speaking in hushed, urgent tones on his phone. Through the glass door, I could hear fragments of his conversation. "I know the timing is terrible. I can't keep pretending. Jake doesn't understand you like I do." When he noticed me watching, he quickly ended the call and came inside. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "It's just Marcus," Ryan said, avoiding my eyes. "He's going through a rough patch. Might need to take some time off work." That night, while Ryan slept, I did something I had never done in our entire relationship. I looked through his phone. What I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about the man I was planning to marry. The messages between Ryan and Marcus went back 8 months. 8 months of daily conversations, shared memories, and emotional intimacy that made my stomach turn. But it wasn't just the frequency that devastated MIT, was the content. "I dream about you every night," Marcus had written just 2 weeks ago. "I wake up wishing things were different." Ryan's response came an hour later. "You know, I feel the same way. This situation is killing me." There were photos too. Pictures of them having coffee at a small cafe I'd never seen, hiking trails I didn't recognize, sitting together at what appeared to be Marcus's apartment. In every image, they looked comfortable, intimate, like a couple who belonged together. The financial records were even worse. Ryan had been transferring money from our joint savings account to pay for Marcus's therapy sessions with a private practice downtown. Not the pro bono work he'd described to me, but expensive sessions that cost $300 each. Over the past 6 months, he'd spent nearly $5,000 of our money we'd been saving for our honeymoon and his ex-boyfriend's mental health care. But the message that broke me completely was from just 5 days ago. Had sent a long emotional text about not being able to handle watching Ryan marry someone else. He wrote about their history, their connection, and how he'd made a terrible mistake letting Ryan go years ago. Ryan's response was immediate and devastating. "I never stopped loving you either. Jake is a good man, but what we have is different. It's deeper. I just don't know how to untangle myself from this situation without destroying everyone." I sat in our bedroom, Ryan sleeping peacefully beside me, reading about how my fiancé was planning to untangle himself from our engagement. The man I'd spent 3 years building a life with, the man I'd trusted with my future, had been living a complete lie. The worst part wasn't even the emotional betrayal. It was the calculation behind it. Ryan hadn't made a spontaneous mistake or fallen accidentally into temptation. He had systematically deceived me for months, using our shared resources to fund his secret relationship while planning our engagement party and accepting congratulations from friends and family. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of our relationship through this new lens. How many times had Ryan been thinking about Marcus when he kissed me goodnight? Many Tuesday evenings had he come home from their secret meetings and pretended to be excited about wedding planning. The next morning, Ryan was unusually affectionate over breakfast. He made my favorite blueberry pancakes and kept touching my hand while we ate, telling me how excited he was about the engagement party. "Just think," he said, squeezing my fingers, "in 2 days we'll be celebrating with everyone we love." Beginning of our forever. His performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed him completely. But now I could see the guilt behind his smile, the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine when he talked about our future. I spent that day in a strange state of calm detachment. While Ryan was at work, I organized the evidence I'd found. I took screenshots of the most damning messages, printed the bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers, and compiled everything into a folder. Then I called my lawyer. David Chin had handled the legal work for my startup and had become a friend over the years. When I explained the situation, he was immediately concerned. "Jake, I'm sorry you're going through this," he said over the phone. "But I have to ask Carr, you sure you want to go through with the engagement party? You could postpone? Give yourself time to process this properly?" I had considered canceling. It would have been the sensible thing to do, the mature response. That would save everyone embarrassment. But something inside me rebelled against protecting Ryan from the consequences of his choices. "No," I told David. "I want him to show his true colors in front of everyone. Let them see who he really is." That evening, Ryan suggested we go out for dinner to celebrate our last night. As an engaged couple, before becoming the center of attention at the party, he chose the restaurant where we'd had our first official date, a cozy Italian place in the Pearl District. Throughout dinner, he was attentive and romantic. He ordered a bottle of expensive wine, held my hand across the table, and spoke enthusiastically about the guest list for tomorrow's party. "Marcus RSVPED, yes. he mentioned casually while twirling his pasta. I'm glad he'll be there. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It means a lot to have all our friends celebrating with us. The audacity was breathtaking. Ryan was planning to have his secret lover attend our engagement party while maintaining the facade of our happy relationship. Wondered if they'd planned it together, if they'd discussed how to act around each other. Whether Marcus would congratulate me with a straight face while knowing he'd been undermining our relationship for months. That's great, I managed to say. Looking forward to seeing him again. Ryan smiled warmly, apparently pleased by my enthusiasm for including his ex-boyfriend in our celebration. If he noticed any change in my demeanor, he didn't show it. The morning of the engagement party, I woke up with crystalline clarity about what I needed to do. While Ryan showered, I transferred the majority of our joint savings into my personal account. Not as revenge, but as protection. If Ryan could secretly spend thousands of our money on Marcus, I couldn't trust him not to drain our accounts entirely. I also called Ryan's mother, Linda. She'd always been kind to me, treating me like the son she'd never had. Of all the people who would be hurt by Ryan's deception, I felt worst about her. Linda, I said when she answered, I need to tell you something important about tonight. There's going to be some drama, and I want you to be prepared. What kind of drama, honey? She asked, her voice immediately concerned. Ryan's been having an affair. I found out yesterday. I'm not going to make a scene at the party, but I wanted you to know so you're not blindsided. Hey, the silence on. The other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. Jake, she finally said, her voice shaky. Are you absolutely certain? Ryan loves you so much. I can't imagine. I have proof, I said gently. Text messages, financial records, photos. I'm sorry, Linda. I know this isn't what you want to hear. She started crying then, quiet sobs that broke my heart. I'm so sorry, Jake. You don't deserve this. You've been nothing but good to our family. I know you love Ryan, I said, and I know this is going to be hard for you, but I needed you to hear it from me first. After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of peace. The hardest conversation was over. Whatever happened at the party would be a relief compared to that phone call. Ryan spent the afternoon getting ready with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely excited about celebrating our love, tried on 3 different outfits before settling on a navy suit that brought out his eyes, same suit he'd worn on our first formal date. You look incredible, he said as I finished adjusting my tie. I can't wait to show you off tonight. At the Riverside Country Club, everything looked perfect. The florist had arranged white roses and eucalyptus exactly as Ryan had requested. The jazz quartet was setting up in the corner. The catering staff was putting finishing touches on the appetizer stations. The venue was elegant and romantic, exactly what I'd dreamed of for this milestone moment. Guests began arriving at 7, and for the first hour, I played my part perfectly. I smiled for photos, thanked people for coming, and accepted congratulations graciously. Ryan stayed close to my side, his hand often resting on my lower back, the picture of a devoted fiancé. Marcus arrived fashionably late, looking handsome in a charcoal gray suit. He hugged Ryan a beat too long and complimented me on the beautiful venue. His performance was as polished as Ryan's, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to Ryan when he thought no one was looking. Congratulations, Jake, Marcus said, shaking my hand firmly. You and Ryan are perfect for each other. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly, I almost admired his skill. The moment I'd been waiting for came at 8:30. Ryan's phone buzzed during my father's toast, and I watched his face go pale as he read the message. He excused himself, quietly, stepping away from our table to take a call. When he returned 5 minutes later, his expression was panicked. Jake, he whispered urgently, I need to leave. Marcus is having a crisis. He's threatening to hurt himself. And there, it was, the choice Ryan had been building toward for months, presented with perfect dramatic timing in front of everyone who mattered to us. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. 200 guests stared at me, waiting to see how I would respond. To my fiancé abandoning our engagement party for his ex-boyfriend's supposed emergency, Ryan stood frozen by our table, his car keys already in his hand, his eyes pleading with me to understand. "Go," I said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Marcus needs you more than I do." Ryan's relief was visible, but he hesitated. "Jake, I'll be back as soon as I can. This shouldn't take long." "Just don't hurry on my account," I replied, my voice steady and clear. "Take all the time you need." Something in my tone made him pause. For a moment I thought he might stay. Choose our engagement party over Marcus's manufactured crisis. But then his phone buzzed again, and without another word he hurried toward the exit. The murmur of confused conversations filled the room as guests tried to process what they'd just witnessed. I remained standing at our sweetheart table, watching my fiancé disappear through the ballroom doors. The jazz quartet, uncertain whether to continue playing, let their music fade to an awkward silence. Linda approached first, her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. "Jake, honey, I'm so sorry. You know, Ryan, he's always been too generous with his time when people need help." "Actually," I said loud enough for several nearby tables to hear, "I don't think I know Ryan at all." The comment rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. David, Ryan's father, pushed through the guests with the determined stride of a man accustomed to fixing problems through force of will. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Why aren't you going after him? A man's fiancé just left to help someone in crisis, and you're standing here making cryptic comments?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "Because a man who spends months secretly meeting his ex-boyfriend, using our wedding savings to pay for his therapy, and planning to untangle himself from our relationship, doesn't deserve my help during his manufactured emergency." The folder hit the table with a soft thud that somehow seemed to echo through the now silent ballroom. David's face went white as I opened it to reveal the printed screenshots of Ryan's messages with Marcus. "This is from 3 days ago," said, reading aloud from one of the printouts. Marcus writes, "I can't watch you marry him." The night that was supposed to mark the beginning of a life together had instead become the funeral for a relationship built on lies. Jake stood in the ballroom, once filled with laughter, music, and celebration, now reduced to silence and half-finished drinks. Scent of wilting roses mixed with the fading strains of jazz, leaving a ghost of what should have been. He looked down at his phone, its screen glowing with dozens of missed calls and unread messages from Ryan. A barrage of regret, excuses, and anger that he no longer had the energy or desire to engage with. It had started with a message he was never meant to see. "Please come find me tonight." Ryan's reply, "I never stopped loving you either. Jake is a good man, but what we have is different." That was the first crack, and everything else had followed: bank records, photos. 8 months of hidden communication. Evidence so clear it couldn't be denied. Ryan hadn't just slipped, he'd crafted a whole second life and let Jake believe they were building a future. Jake had delivered the truth publicly, not out of cruelty, but because silence would have been complicity. He hadn't expected applause, just honesty and maybe some peace. Instead, he got gasps, whispers, and phones held just low enough to avoid being obvious. But what mattered more was the reaction that came afterward, his father's calm support. Daniel's fierce loyalty, and even Linda's devastated sincerity she hadn't known, she hadn't condoned. And despite everything, she still saw Jake as family. Throughout the night, as guests stayed and slowly let go of the shock, Jake realized he wasn't alone. Friends and strangers alike came to him with quiet affirmations and long overdue honesty. Ryan's image cracked in their eyes, too, as the charming, impulsive man who always did whatever he pleased and expected others to forgive it. Jake could see the truth more clearly now. He had loved Ryan, yes, but he'd also made excuses for him. He'd hoped that love would mature into loyalty, that commitment would lead to change. It hadn't. Ryan hadn't just betrayed Jake. He had never truly chosen him. And still, Jake stood tall. He hadn't lost everything he had freed himself from: a lie. And while the pain was sharp and the silence around him deep, there was clarity in that emptiness. He hadn't humiliated Ryan. Ryan had done that to himself. Jake had simply chosen not to carry the burden of silence. As the last of the guests left and the band rolled away their equipment, Jake took one last look around the room. This was where our life had almost begun and where it had ended instead. But maybe, just maybe, something else was starting. Something quieter, something honest. He deleted Ryan's messages without reading the rest. Tomorrow would hurt. Also, be his. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Whatever explanations or justifications he wanted to offer, I wasn't interested in hearing them. Instead, I called an Uber and went home to our loft, knowing it would be the last night. I spent there as Ryan's fiancé. No, Ryan didn't come home that night or the next morning. When he finally walked through our loft door at 3 in the afternoon, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of either exhaustion or guilt. I was sitting at our kitchen island with my laptop open, calmly researching apartments. 3 years of sharing a life with someone teaches you their rhythms, and I could feel Ryan's hesitation from across the room. He wanted to approach, to start the conversation that would determine our future, but something in my posture warned him to proceed carefully. "Jake," he finally said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I looked up from my laptop screen where I'd been browsing one-bedroom apartments in the Pearl District. "Do we? I thought your actions last night said everything." "That's not fair," Ryan said, moving closer but stopping when he saw the packed suitcases by the door. Marcus was genuinely in crisis. He was talking about hurting himself. What was I supposed to do? Let him suffer because it was inconvenient timing? The practiced nature of his explanation told me he'd spent the past 18 hours rehearsing it. Every word was carefully chosen to paint himself as the compassionate hero and me as the unreasonable partner who couldn't understand basic human decency. "You were supposed to tell me the truth," I said, closing the laptop. "You were supposed to tell me that you've been in love with your ex-boyfriend for months, that you've been using our money to fund your secret relationship, and that you never wanted to marry me in the first place." Ryan's face went pale. "That's not what happened." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the screenshots I'd saved. Marcus writes, "I can't watch you marry him." Your response, "I never stopped loving you either." Gent. How exactly am I misinterpreting that, Ryan? You went through my phone? His voice cracked with indignation, as if my invasion of his privacy was the real crime here. "I went through my fiancé's phone when I suspected he was lying to me," I corrected. "I found months of evidence that he was planning to abandon our relationship for his ex. So yes, I violated your privacy. I also violated Marcus's therapy fund by taking back the $5,000 you stole from our savings." Ryan sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. For a moment I thought he might finally tell me the truth, might acknowledge the pain he'd caused and take responsibility for his choices. Instead, he looked up with the expression of someone who decided that his best defense was a good offense. "You humiliated me in front of everyone we know," he said. "My parents, my friends, my colleagues. They all think I'm some kind of monster now because you decided to air our private business in public." I shared the truth about our relationship, I said. "If that humiliated you, maybe you should have thought about that before lying to me for 8 months. "It wasn't 8 months, Ryan protested. "Marcus and I didn't start talking again until..." "Until what?" I interrupted. "Till you realized you made a mistake choosing me over him. Till you figured out that getting married wouldn't magically make your feelings for him disappear?" Ryan's silence was answer enough. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how much to admit, how much he could get away with denying. Even now, caught with overwhelming evidence of his deception, he was still trying to manage the narrative. "I never meant for this to happen," he finally said. "When Marcus moved back to Portland, I thought I was over him. I thought what we had was friendship. Being around him again, seeing how much he'd grown and changed..." "Stop," I said, standing up from the kitchen. "Island. I don't want to hear about how wonderful Marcus is or how inevitable your feelings were. I want to know why you proposed to me if you were still in love with someone else." Ryan looked genuinely confused by the question, as if the contradiction hadn't occurred to him. "'Cause I love you too, Jake. Differently, but I do love you." I thought I could make it work. The casual cruelty of his honesty was breathtaking. He'd proposed to me, planned our engagement party, and accepted congratulations from friends and family, all while believing he was settling for second choice. I was supposed to be grateful that he'd loved me enough to try. He thought you could. Make it work, I repeated slowly. Like our marriage would be some kind of consolation prize for not being brave enough to choose what you really wanted. That's not how I meant it, Ryan said quickly, but the damage was done. He'd revealed exactly how he saw our relationship, a comfortable compromise rather than a passionate choice. My phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Linda's name appeared on the screen and I answered immediately, grateful for the excuse to step away from Ryan's explanations. "Jake," she said, her voice shaky, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you something. Did you really take money out of your joint account?" I glanced at Ryan, who was watching me with growing panic. "Transferred our savings to my personal account?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because Ryan called us this morning asking for $15,000. He said you'd frozen all his accounts and he needed money to pay for Marcus's treatment at a private facility." The lie was so audacious I almost laughed. "Linda, I haven't frozen anything. Ryan has access to his own checking account and his credit cards. The only account I touched was our joint savings, which he'd been secretly draining for months." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "So he lied to us." "He's been lying to everyone," I said, watching Ryan's face grow redder. "The question is whether you're going to keep enabling it." There was a long pause before Linda spoke again. "David already transferred the money. Ryan said it was an emergency." Of course he had, even after being exposed as a liar and a cheat. Ryan had managed to manipulate his parents into funding his dramatic reunion with Marcus. The pattern was so established that they'd responded automatically, even knowing what he'd done to me. "I'm sorry, Linda," I said. "I know this is hard for you." "Jake," she said quietly, "can I ask you something personal? Are you really done with him? Because David thinks you're just angry and you'll work things out?" I looked at Ryan, who was sitting on our couch in our shared apartment, surrounded by the life we'd built together, still believing he could talk his way out of the consequences of his choices. "I'm really done," I said. "Ryan made his decision last night. Now I'm making mine." After hanging up, I returned to the kitchen where Ryan was pacing anxiously. "What did my mother want?" "She wanted to know if I'd really stolen your money," I said. "I told her the truth, that you'd stolen ours and then lied to your parents to get more." Ryan's pacing stopped abruptly. "You told her I was lying? Were you not lying?" I asked. "Do you actually need $15,000 for Marcus's treatment? Or did you just want money to start your new life with him?" The question hung in the air between us. Ryan could have admitted the truth, could have finally stopped manipulating everyone around him. Instead, he chose to double down. "Marcus is genuinely struggling," he said. "The money's for his treatment." "Show me," I said. "Show me the treatment facility, the intake paperwork, the doctor's recommendations. If this is really about mental health care and not about funding your romantic getaway, prove it." Ryan's inability to produce any evidence was telling. He'd spent the morning lying to his parents about a medical emergency that didn't exist, using their love and concern to bankroll whatever plan he and Marcus had concocted. "I can't believe you're being so heartless about this," Ryan said, his voice taking on the wounded tone he used when he wanted sympathy. "A man's mental health is at stake, and you're treating it like some kind of scam." "A man's mental health was at stake," I agreed. "Mine? And you nearly destroyed it with 8 months of lies and manipulation." The truth of that statement seemed to hit him for the first time. I could see him processing the idea that his actions had consequences beyond his own inconvenience, that I might have been genuinely hurt by his deception. "Jake," he said softly, "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did hurt me," I replied. "You hurt me every time you chose Marcus over me. You hurt me every time you lied about where you were going. You hurt me when you used our money to fund your secret relationship. And you hurt me most of all when you abandoned our engagement." Party to run to him. Ryan sat down heavily, finally seeming to understand that this conversation wasn't going to end with my forgiveness and his redemption. "So what happens now?" I gestured to the suitcases by the door. "Now you pack your things and find somewhere else to live. The lease is in my name, so you have until the end of the week to get your belongings out." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Guess." As if his housing situation was my responsibility. "I assume Marcus has room for you," I said. After all, that's who you chose. Ryan's face crumpled as the reality of his situation finally hit him. He'd lost his fiancée, humiliated himself in front of everyone he knew, and now he was being asked to face the practical consequences of his dramatic gesture. The romantic reunion he'd envisioned was colliding with the messy reality of actually untangling a 3-year relationship. "This isn't how I wanted things to end," he said. "You shouldn't have ended them," I replied, opening my laptop to continue apartment hunting. The conversation was over. 6 months after Ryan moved out, I received an unexpected phone call from Linda. I was in my new downtown apartment, reviewing quarterly reports for my startup, when her name appeared on my screen. "Jake," she said, her voice carrying a warmth. "I hadn't heard since before the engagement party disaster. I hope I'm not bothering you, but I wanted to check in and see how you're doing." "I'm doing well," I said, and meant it. The past months had been challenging but liberating. Without Ryan's constant drama and emotional manipulation, I'd thrown myself into growing my business and rebuilding my social life. "I'm glad to hear that," Linda said. "Listen, I know this might sound strange, but would you be interested in having lunch sometime? I've been thinking about you, and well, I miss our conversations." Linda and I had always gotten along beautifully. She'd been the mother figure I'd lost when my own mom passed away during college, and I genuinely missed her presence in my life. "I'd love that," I said. We met the following Saturday at a quiet cafe in Northwest Portland. Linda looked healthier than she had in years, with a new haircut and a lightness in her demeanor that I hadn't seen before. "You look happy," she observed as we settled into our booth. "I am happy," I said. It took me a while to realize how much energy I was spending trying to make that relationship work. Linda nodded sadly. "I owe you an apology, Jake. David and I enabled Ryan's behavior for too long. He always made excuses for him, always bailed him out when he made poor choices. We taught him that his actions didn't have real consequences. You were being good parents," I said. "You loved your son. We were being weak parents," she corrected. "And we failed you in the process." Over lunch, Linda filled me in on Ryan's situation. The romantic reunion with Marcus had lasted exactly 3 weeks before imploding spectacularly. Apparently, the reality of actually living together had revealed that their relationship worked better as a fantasy than as a daily practice. Marcus kicked him out, Linda said with a mixture of sadness and exasperation. Said Ryan was too needy, too demanding. Ryan came crawling back to us, expecting us to fix everything like we always had. "And did you?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Linda shook her head firmly. "David wanted to, but I put my foot down. I told Ryan he was 32 years old, and it was time he learned to solve his own problems." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and I found myself genuinely enjoying Linda's company. She'd always been intelligent and funny, qualities that had been overshadowed by her constant worry about Ryan's latest crisis. "I have a confession," she said. "As we finished our coffee, I've been following your company's progress online. The expansion into the Seattle market looks incredible. The startup had indeed taken off in ways I'd never imagined. Without the distraction of Ryan's emotional chaos, I'd been able to focus completely on business development. We'd secured 2 major contracts and hired 6 new employees in the past 4 months. "Thank you," I said. "It's been exciting to watch it grow." "I'm proud of you," Linda said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You built something amazing, and you did it with integrity." Our lunch meetings became a monthly tradition. Linda and I discovered that we had more in common than just our shared experience with Ryan's selfishness. She was an avid reader, loved hiking, and had a dry sense of humor that reminded me why I'd always enjoyed her company. During our third lunch, Linda mentioned that she was considering divorce. "David can't accept that Ryan is responsible for his own mess," she explained. "He keeps saying we should help him get back on his feet, find him a job, maybe help with rent until he figures things out. I'm tired of enabling our son's inability to function as an adult." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to travel," she said with a smile. "I want to take art classes and volunteer at the animal shelter and read books without David constantly asking me when I'm going to call Ryan to check on him." The idea of Linda finally prioritizing her own happiness made me genuinely happy. She'd spent 33 years managing other people's emotions and deserved the chance to focus on herself. 6 months later, Linda called to tell me her divorce was final. "I kept the house," she said, sounding lighter than I'd heard her in years. "David moved in with his sister in Sacramento." "How do you feel?" I asked. "Free," she said without hesitation. "For the first time in decades, I feel free." That evening, as I sat on my apartment balcony overlooking the city lights, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The startup was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. I developed genuine friendships with people who valued honesty and reliability. And somehow, the most unexpected relationship to emerge from the wreckage of my engagement was a deep friendship with my ex-fiance's mother. Linda and I had both learned the same lesson from Ryan's betrayal, that love without respect is worthless, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Still coming to the gallery opening tonight?" I'd been dreading social events for months after the engagement party debacle, but lately I'd been pushing myself to get back out there. Tonight felt like the right time to stop hiding. On my way, I texted back. At the gallery, I found myself actually enjoying the evening. The artwork was impressive, the wine was good, and I didn't feel the need to check my phone every few minutes or worry about someone else's emotional crisis. "Jake?" a voice said behind me. I turned to find Marcus standing there, looking uncomfortable and significantly thinner than I remembered. He'd apparently spotted me across the room and worked up the courage to approach. "Marcus," I said neutrally. "How are you?" "I'm okay," he said, though he clearly wasn't. "Listen, I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. The way Ryan and I handled things was wrong." "Yes, it was," I agreed. Marcus seemed surprised by my directness. He'd probably expected me to downplay the situation or make him feel better about his role in it. "I hope you know that I never intended for things to go the way they did," he continued. "But you're not sorry they did," I said, more as observation than accusation. Marcus considered this for a moment. "No," he said finally. "I'm not sorry, Ryan." And I tried again. "I'm just sorry we hurt you in the process." I appreciated his honesty. "How did it work out for you?" "It didn't," Marcus admitted. "Turns out the fantasy of being together was better than the reality. Ryan's not the same person he was in college, and neither am I." "I could have told you that," I said with a slight smile. Marcus laughed ruefully. "Suppose you could have." "For what it's worth, Jake, you deserve better than what he gave you." "I know," I said. "That's why I chose better." As Marcus walked away, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The man who had helped destroy my relationship looked miserable while I was standing in an art gallery, successful and genuinely content with my life. My phone rang as I was leaving the gallery. Linda's name appeared on the screen. "Jake," she said, "I know it's late, but I wanted to share some news. I got accepted into that photography program in Tuscany, Linda." "That's amazing," I said. "When do you leave?" "Next month. 6 weeks of traveling through Italy, learning from master photographers." "I'm proud of you," I said, and meant it completely. "I'm proud of both of us," she replied. We figured out how to choose ourselves. After hanging up, I walked slowly back to my apartment, thinking about the strange turns life takes. 18 months ago, I'd thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. Now, everything was different, and somehow infinitely better. Startup was expanding into 3 new markets. My friendship with Linda had become one of the most meaningful relationships in my life, and I'd learned that choosing myself over someone else's dysfunction wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Ryan had taught me an invaluable lesson, though not the one he'd intended. Sometimes the people who claim to love you will try to make you complicit in your own mistreatment. The strongest thing you can do is refuse to participate. I never saw Ryan again, though I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved back to Sacramento to live with his father. Apparently the dramatic gesture of choosing love over stability hadn't worked out quite the way he'd planned. But for Linda and me, choosing ourselves over dysfunction had worked out perfectly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. click and check them out.